From January 17th to February 26, 1991, Iraq under Saddam Hussein fired 88 al-Husayn Scud ballistic missiles at Saudi Arabia and Israel during the Gulf War. The origins of the al-Husayn could be traced back to the first stages of the Iran-Iraq War, where Iraq was the first belligerent to use long-range artillery rockets during the war, firing limited numbers of Frog 7s at the town of Dezful and Avaz, and therefore Iran responded with Scud Bs obtained from Libya. The Iranian missiles could hit a target 185 miles away, and therefore key Iraqi cities such as Kirkuk and Baghdad came within range of this weapon. First, a little disclaimer. I won't be talking about the Delta Force and SAS hunts for mobile Scud missiles within Iraq, or really about the individual F-15 strikes against fixed Scud missile locations, as that will be its own video on its own. This video is primarily about Iraq strikes in Saudi Arabia and Israel with the missiles, as well as some context with the Iran-Iraq War. Iraq would also deploy the Scud B missile against Iran, but was conversely unable to strike the main Iranian industrial centers, including the capital of Tehran, because these are located more than 300 miles from the border. To surmount the Iranian advantage, Iraqi engineers designed a program to upgrade the original Scuds into a series of ballistic missiles whose range would surpass 500 miles. The first stage in development, called the al-Husayn, had a range of 400 miles and allowed the Iraqi army to attack deep inside Iranian borders. The Iraqis had initiated Project 1728 for indigenous Scud engineer development and production. The range was extended by reducing the original 945-kilogram warhead to just 500 kilograms and increasing the propellant capacity. The warhead carried high explosives, although it did have chemical, biological, and nuclear capabilities. The al-Husayn guidance system was inertial without a terminal phase. The altitude where the motor burnt out was 31 miles, while the trajectory as highest altitude, or apogee, was 94 miles. The accuracy for the impact, or circular error probable, was estimated in the radius of 1,000 meters, and the missile launch weight was 6,400 kilograms. Okay, I'll stop nerding out on the missile and get back to the history portion here. So during the Iran-Iraq War, the Iraqis launched about 200 modified Scud missiles from 1987 to 1988. But their poor accuracy made them ineffective to conduct a major strategic campaign. Therefore, Iraq made them ballistic weapons of terror, forcing thousands of refugees out of the main Iranian cities. This exchange in ballistic missiles is known as the War of the Cities, as both sides kind of just shot missiles at one another's cities just to spread terror among the civilian population. The full-scale campaign lasted from February 29, 1988, until April 20th, when a truce was agreed upon by both sides, with Iraq being declared the winner of the War of the Cities, but nobody would end up winning the Iran-Iraq War. Pivoting to the Gulf War, Iraq launched 46 al-Husayn Scuds at Saudi Arabia. However, only 10 of the 46 did any significant damage, and out of those 10, 2 were aimed at U.S. military facilities, 1 was aimed at a Saudi government building, and the other 7 targeted civilian areas. 8 out of the 10 missiles were successfully intercepted by Patriot missile systems, therefore the warheads and debris caused minimal damage. However, of the 2 which were not intercepted, 1 hit an automobile workshop and damaged a neighborhood, and the other hit a U.S. Air Force base in Dhahran. The Dhahran attack occurred on February 25th and was the deadliest as well as the most tactically successful missile attack of the war, as it caused 28 American deaths and injured 110 more. One of these units involved in the incident was the 14th Quartermaster Detachment, which specialized in water purification and suffered the heaviest toll among U.S. troops deployed during the Persian Gulf War, with 81% of its soldiers killed or wounded. Although these Scud missile attacks were largely inaccurate, the missiles caused 28 of the total 158 American battle deaths during the Gulf War. Most of the Iraqi ballistic missiles fired at Saudi Arabia were aimed at military targets, leading to low civilian casualties, for a total of 28 American soldiers dead and 150 wounded, with 1 security guard killed and 85 civilians injured. Turning to Israel, Iraq had felt that causing an Israeli retaliation upon Iraq would convince other Arab states to withdraw from the coalition against Iraq, and therefore they launched 42 Scud missiles at the country, and 38 of them landed within Israel, while the other 4 landed in the West Bank. Although thousands of houses and apartments were damaged by the strikes, only 2 people died directly as a consequence of the impacts. Another 12 died from indirect causes such as suffocation while wearing gas masks, heart attacks, and incorrect usage of atropine out of fear of Iraqi chemical weapons, which had been previously used against the Kurds at Halabja in the Al-Anbar campaign. However, Israel was convinced by Jordan and the United States not to retaliate. Jordanian King Hussein bin Talal had persuaded Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir to consider Jordan's stability and not violate Jordanian airspace during a bilateral meeting 2 weeks earlier. Also, the George H.W. Bush administration had increased defensive aid to Israel for the purposes of actively countering Iraq's barrages and preventing an Israeli counterattack, thereby ensuring that the coalition's Muslim countries did not withdraw as the United States provided Israel with Patriot missile defense systems. The threats posed by the al-Husayn and other Scud missiles forced the coalition air support to divert 40% of their missions to hunting down the launchers along with their support vehicles and supplies. Therefore, the ground war was postponed by 1 week, and many missile silos were destroyed by precision bombings carried out by F-15s during the first hours of Operation Desert Storm. And again, as I mentioned before, this will be its own video later, so I'm not going into detail for it here. After the March 1991 ceasefire, the Iraqis were only allowed to purchase or produce missiles with a range no longer than 150 kilometers. At the end of the war, the Iraqi government declared that it only had 61 al-Husayn and other ballistic missiles in its arsenal. These weapons were destroyed under UNSCOM supervision and were all supposedly destroyed by July of 1991. However, many countries were suspicious that the Iraqi army may have hidden as many as 200 al-Husayn modified Scud missiles. The Iraqis also took advantage of the provisions of the ceasefire by developing two types of short-range ballistic missiles, being the Ababil 100, which has been called the Al-Fatah, and the development of the Al-Samud missile, which were in an experimental phase at the time of the invasion of Iraq in 2003 and would be operationally used in targeting Kuwait during the conflict. Did you know about Iraq's al-Husayn modified Scud missile strikes on Saudi Arabia and Israel before this video? What other aspects of the Gulf War would you like for me to cover? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching.